Well, thanks so much for tuning into the Market Wrap. I'm Niraj Shah with Nickey Mirchandani, and the markets played true to the kind of start and the kind of cues that the Asian screen was giving today, which is a very flat day of trade. And it's not bad, really. You don't want the markets going up every single day. It seems just a bit unreal. So it was a quiet day of trade today, and almost everything stayed quiet. The Bank Nifty was quiet, Reliance was a bit quiet. So we didn't have too many gyrations. Of course, individual stocks did move around, and we'll talk about some of those. So let's get the Nifty 50 up on the screen first and show you what moved and what didn't. So SBI Life about 3%. Cipla had a bit of a move, about 2.5% odd. HDFC Life continues to rise and shine. Now it was known that the MSCI rebalancing or the weightage uptake is going to happen because this was the talk of town since the last 2 days, which is why you saw HDFC Life gain, I believe, day before yesterday as well. But some impact coming in on that one. Very interestingly, no impact coming in on Airtel, despite it being the highest receiver. Maybe people have discounted the news so much in Airtel that it just went down today post announcement. So 1.5% lower. Some of the banks had a slightly iffy day, the likes of HDFC Bank and Axis. So that's the other interesting story that played out in trade. And Tata Steel, despite very strong numbers, corrected about 1%. We're seeing this trend. Some of the most usual suspects are not quite necessarily behaving in the way you would expect them to. Nicky joins in. And Nicky, what's the stock that stood out today in the large cap space?
GAIL, because the numbers were clearly good set of numbers. Tata Steel, 4.5% uptake in trade and then profit booking, which took place by the fag end of the trade. But GAIL delivered good set of numbers. In fact, if you look at the bottom line performance, it was up by 20% quarter on quarter. 1,487 crore, the bottom line figure, which pretty much was more or less in line with the estimates of 1,438. Operational performance, we saw a 43% jump, and margins too expanded from 9% to 12.5%. So clearly some, cost rationalization and a good set of top line, which has contributed to, the final jump in the bottom line performance. And this comes despite the fall of 35% in other income. So clearly solid set of Q3 numbers coming in for GAIL. But what are you picking up in the broader space, Niraj?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the market breadth was like in today's trade, because yesterday on a good day of trade, you had weakish market breadth. In today's session, a bunch of stocks came off. The breadth a bit better than yesterday. But if you just look at a lot of stocks came off in the session. Varroc, again, a result play, but came off. There's some weakness in Team Lease, so down about 5%. There's some weakness in the future group stocks in the session today. Narayan Rudalaya, some of the others too, didn't have the best of days. What did well? Polyplex, I think they gave out a large dividend if I'm not wrong, but the stock up about 17%. It anyway started off about 10, 12, 15% higher, doing very well. TTK Prestige doing well. Affle tends to bounce back every time there is weakness. And the next day or the next day after next, it tends to bounce back. Similarly for IIFL Finance, stays out of news for a few days and then comes back. Though IIFL Finance, I must say, yesterday saw some very smart delivery-based buying. And Graphite India and HEG2 gaining about 7% apiece. The Organics gaining about 6.5% in the session today, and Dixon is now at 18,700. It's just unreal what Dixon does. And lastly, Page Industries, 5% up today after the 3% up move yesterday. Nicky, what names, what individual stocks?
Yeah, I'm going to be talking about Electrode makers. HED reported good set of numbers. Tomorrow Graphite India will be reporting in numbers. Utilization levels have been picking up for HEG. They're expected to improve going forward in Q4. And the high cost needle coke inventory, that cost is expected to be fully seen in Q1 of FY22, which means that Q4 could be better if the utilization were to pick up. The cost is supposed to be, probably the full impact is to be felt in Q1. So we are looking a good set of numbers even from Electrode makers. Now Graphite India will be reporting in numbers tomorrow. What also did well in trade today was Page Industries, which jumped the most or the highest in more than 2 years. The maker reported almost a record profit in third quarter. Revenue was up by 17%, net profitability up by 77%. EBITDA, look at that number, 63% on year-on-year basis. Margins have expanded to 25% as compared to 17.5%. So clearly, strong set of numbers being reported by Page Industries, because of which the stock rallied to more than 2 years high. But anything specific that you'd like to keep an eye out on, Niraj? Because I think there are a couple of nifty earnings which will be coming out tomorrow, be it in the likes of Coal India, ITC, and Power Grid.
Yeah, and a bunch of non-nifty names that are still to report numbers today, Nikki. Today has been a very important day of trade simply because of the four nifty names, but the non-nifty names, all of which were very important, and be interesting to see what happens in the course of the next 24 hours in terms of earnings. So I think everybody will be watching out for that. I would reckon, Nikki, that the commentary from Hindalco would be important to gauge what the sentiment around the metal space could be like, right? Because the results reactions are not exactly happening in the same fashion as you would expect. And then, of course, also tell us about the global markets.
Sure, you're right. The way the numbers have stacked up, the stock hasn't reacted to that, in that quantum, because there's a big beat coming in terms of EBITDA performance of the stock, and we'd like to understand if there is some underlying adjustment that probably the management would guide over maybe the con call, which is going to happen at 4, and also in an interview to us. But at this point of time, global setup is pretty mixed. European markets are trading mixed, and the last time I checked US stock futures, they were also indicative of a pretty mixed chart coming in for Wall Street. But there are a slew of earnings which have been reported, even the global market. Thyssen Group, for example, that stock has risen more than 4.5% after the German conglomerate has raised the full year outlook for sales as well as cash flow. So clearly a positive coming in for steel sector overall. But at this point of time, this is all that we have for you. And thank you so much for tuning in.